Something very important is happening behind the scenes in Baltimore right now, and honestly, most people still haven't realized how big this could become for the Ravens moving forward. While the national media keeps focusing on the usual off-season headlines, inside the building there's a completely different energy starting to grow around this team. And after what just happened with Lamar Jackson returning to OTAs, combined with the way Jesse Minter has been handling everything publicly, there are now strong signs that this organization may finally be entering a brand new phase that could completely change the direction of this season. But there's one detail from all of this that has fans talking the most, and once you connect everything together, you start to understand why the excitement around Baltimore is getting louder every single day. But before we continue, make sure you smash that like button if you truly believe the Ravens are building something special this year. Let's show how strong Ravens Nation really is. And in the comments, I want everybody to write this: I'm optimistic about this Ravens team, because the confidence around Baltimore right now is starting to feel very real. Now the interesting part here is not just the fact that Lamar Jackson returned. It's the way everything around the situation was handled. According to the discussion in the source material, Jesse Minter addressed Lamar's absence immediately and made it clear there was communication between them the entire time. He explained that he knew exactly why Lamar wasn't there, that they had already talked about it privately, and that there was no issue between the quarterback and the coaching staff. That matters more than some fans probably realize. Because over the years across the NFL, and even at times in Baltimore, people have seen situations where the relationship between a head coach and a franchise quarterback can become uncomfortable, awkward, or tense. The file specifically talks about how there were moments in the past where things between Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh didn't always feel smooth publicly. Not necessarily disastrous, but enough for people to notice tension at different points. But this situation with Jesse Minter feels completely different so far. The biggest thing fans are starting to notice is consistency. The material repeatedly emphasizes that everything Jesse Minter has said publicly has matched what has actually happened afterward. He told everyone not to overreact to Lamar missing OTAs. He explained that communication was healthy. He said Lamar would return soon. And then exactly that happened. That's creating a very strong first impression. And once Lamar stepped back into the building, the energy immediately changed again. The source describes how the team already had good vibes during OTAs with rookies, veterans, and most of the roster participating, but Lamar's presence takes things to another level entirely. There's a completely different intensity when number 8 is leading practices, especially with offensive players getting their timing together during the offseason. One of the most interesting parts of the discussion centered around new offensive coordinator Declan Doyle. There's clearly curiosity among fans because Doyle has never worked with a quarterback like Lamar Jackson before. And honestly, that uncertainty is exactly what makes this offense fascinating right now. The material explains that some people are nervous because Doyle is a first-time play caller. But there's also excitement because Lamar gives an offensive coordinator possibilities that most quarterbacks simply cannot provide. The discussion highlights Lamar's ability to make every throw, read defenses, create plays, and then add the dangerous element of his legs on top of everything else. But maybe the most important statement from the entire offensive conversation came from Jesse Minter himself. According to the file, he previously said the Ravens should not have to rely on Lamar Jackson's legs to carry the offense. Instead, Lamar's mobility should function as an added bonus rather than the entire foundation of the system. That could become a huge turning point for this team if it actually plays out that way. Because if the offense fully values Lamar Jackson in every aspect consistently, especially as a passer and decision maker, then the ceiling becomes extremely high. The material specifically says this offense could become really crazy if they properly maximize his complete skill set. And what makes it even more unpredictable is that nobody truly knows what Declan Doyle's offense will look like yet. People can study coaches he has worked with and try to compare systems, but as the source points out, he is not Sean Payton or Ben Johnson. He's Declan Doyle running his own offense with Lamar Jackson as his quarterback. That mystery could end up becoming one of Baltimore's biggest advantages entering the season. The file also touched on roster construction, especially at safety. There was a conversation about possibly keeping 5 safeties on the roster, including names like Kyle Hamilton, Malachi Starks, Alohi Gilman, Darius Washington, Kayvon Wallace, and Keandre Jackson. The emphasis there was special teams value, with Keandre Jackson specifically receiving praise for his special teams performances last season. Then the discussion shifted towards salary cap flexibility and possible moves after June 1st. One of the major topics was Marlon Humphrey and whether the Ravens could potentially create cap space through a release and return type scenario. The material estimates that Humphrey could potentially free up between $16 and $19 million if such a move ever happened. However, there was also clear uncertainty about whether Baltimore would actually take that route. The source also discussed possible additions like Stefon Diggs or A.J. Brown, mentioning that both players would fit financially under certain circumstances, although Stefon Diggs would likely cost significantly less in terms of acquisition and salary. At the same time, there was excitement surrounding Jacoby Lane, with the file describing him as bringing crazy energy and being something different. But through all these roster conversations, all these offensive discussions, and all these offseason debates, everything still circles back to one central reality. When Lamar Jackson is present, the entire organization feels different. OTAs suddenly carry more energy. The offense suddenly feels more dangerous. And the confidence around the building becomes stronger. The exciting part about everything happening right now is that the Ravens are entering this next phase of the offseason with a feeling of unpredictability that could actually work in their favor. And when you really listen carefully to everything being discussed around the team, you can tell there's growing confidence internally about where things are heading. Lamar Jackson being back inside the building was not just another offseason attendance update. It felt like confirmation that the communication between the franchise quarterback and the new coaching leadership is operating smoothly right from the beginning. That's something Ravens fans have wanted to see for a long time. Because whenever there's uncertainty around a superstar quarterback, especially somebody as important as Lamar Jackson, outside narratives start forming instantly. That's exactly why Jesse Minter's handling of the situation stood out so much in the source material. He addressed the absence immediately, stayed calm about it, and publicly made it clear that there was already an understanding between both sides. Then Lamar showed up exactly when Minter suggested he would. That kind of alignment matters. And now attention shifts completely toward what this offense might actually become once the season arrives. The biggest mystery surrounding the Ravens right now is Declan Doyle. Nobody truly knows how he's going to shape this offense because this is brand new territory for him. But at the same time, that unknown element is exactly what has many fans excited instead of nervous. And let's be honest here, Broncos country, offensive line continuity might quietly become one of the biggest reasons Bo Nix continues developing at a high level. There's a growing feeling that this environment is helping him play faster, react quicker, and trust what he's seeing on the field. The conversations around his pocket awareness, movement, and decision-making continue getting stronger, and the offensive line stability around him is clearly playing a huge role in that. At the same time, there's still pressure on this unit to improve in certain areas. Even with all the praise, there were still concerns raised about what happened to the running game during stretches of last season and how pass protection looked in certain critical moments. So while many people are calling this one of the best offensive lines in football, the expectations are now much higher because of that reputation. That's what makes this upcoming season so fascinating. If this offensive line truly performs at the elite level many expect, then the Broncos could have one of the strongest foundations in the NFL. But if issues appear again during key moments, especially late in the season, then the conversations are going to become much more intense because this group is now being judged by championship-level standards internally and externally. And another major storyline here is the coaching transition happening within the offensive line structure. Even though the overall system may not drastically change, there are adjustments happening behind the scenes with responsibilities and hierarchy among the coaches. That dynamic is something many people around the organization are watching closely because player development at this position has clearly been working. Several linemen have earned contracts and elevated their careers under this developmental approach. Now the big challenge becomes sustaining that success while preparing for future roster changes that could arrive after this season.